Hello, everyone, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I am your host, Gil Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe, and welcome to another author interview. My guest today is a creatively driven author, always seeking to blend her passion for writing and the arts with her love and study of nature. Her master's degree in environmental sciences brings a unique perspective and sense of wonder to her work. An environmental scientist by day and author by night, she considers her novel, Love and Defiance, to be one of her greatest accomplishments. And she happily resides with her wonderful husband and two dogs, Chester and Snuffy, in Georgetown, Texas. So without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to a first timer here on the channel, author Kandice Coppala. Kandice, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So before we dive into your historical fiction story, is there anything else you'd like to add about your background?
In terms of writing, no, really my background kind of with writing, it just stems in technical writing because of my degrees in the environmental sciences. But I've always had kind of an artistic flair. I'm a self-studied, what I like to call a self-studied artist. I did have some classes for, decades of my life, but yeah, other than that, other than what you just read, there's not really much more to tell about my background. So
All right. What can you tell us about your book, your sort of fiction romance, Love and Defiance?
yes, so it's a historical romance drama is what I like to call it.
Ooh, okay.
Um it's yes, it's fiction, but it's definitely inspired by a true story of my own ancestors that immigrated here from the southern area of Italy. So
Ooh,
the essence of
okay.
the story is true, but I didn't obviously know them. But all the characters, sporting characters, and everything, they're fiction, and the details of the story are fiction as well. So, but it's
Nice.
a true story or a story based on a true story of forbidden love. So, yeah.
Ooh, I
Really
like it. I like it. You know, you'll probably be the second author who I've met that has written a story about their
Mhm.
family history. The first author, what was her name? I have her book right next to me. Mary Quigley's dad. I haven't had the author on the show, but I've read her book, and her story is about her family, which is of Irish descent,
Oh,
that finds itself in the middle of sort of like the bleeding Kansas War as a prelude to the Civil War. And it's a very, very interesting tale. And I'm now intrigued by this one, Love and Defiance, because you now piqued my curiosity and interest.
oh, good.
So, oh, thank you. So let's actually dive right into the creation of Love and Defiance. So, what was your aha moment with the creation of the story? And then what was sort of like the near desire to tell this story? What was so important about this story that you felt you needed to tell this story and share it with the world?
Yeah, so this was actually a story I just always grew up hearing. My dad's father is he was a pure Italian man. Actually, the main characters of the story, Gregorio Maria, are his grandparents, my grandfather's grandparents. So he grew up knowing their story, and he would always tell it proudly about the Viscount who had to leave Italy because he fell in love with the chambermaid. And
Ooh,
so
okay.
so every time I saw him, so for some reason that story would be brought up, and it just stuck with me as a child and, into adulthood. And then when COVID hit, as I'm sure is the same for many authors, I finally had time to sit down and write it. I actually wrote the first chapter of it a long time ago, like about close to 10 years ago. And then I just kind of forgot about it until yeah, until, you know, our country went on lockdown, and I was working from home. And so I just, like, you know what? I have all this extra time. I'm just going to sit down, kind of map it out and write it and see how it goes. So I guess COVID was my aha moment.
I 100% agree. A lot of authors who I've had on the show say that the lockdown was like the aha moment for all of us to begin writing. And I'm pretty much in the same boat with you. I was still in graduate school by the time the lockdown began, probably starting my first semester in graduate school. Then I had to come back home to Southern California. My school was in Northern California, so I had to drive all the way back down. Everything was remote, so I had to keep busy. So I too wrote my story as well as my second story just to keep busy. And that was like the hallmark for all of us to like find out who we are as authors, to branch out, meet new people. And that was like the most incredible thing, was meeting fellow authors on social media and just exchanging stories and ideas just to keep, you know, busy and social and to not go completely insane.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, meeting, I imagine meeting a lot of new authors on social media, on Instagram especially, and talking about each other's stories. What was sort of the promise you're making to your future readers when like talking with like other authors about, you know, what their stories like, what their goals are, and so forth?
Well, I guess my promise is that the story doesn't end with this book. My plan is to make, or my promise is to make it a series, but kind of just, but expanding the Love and Defiance world and making it like each book based on one of the characters that you'll meet in the original one. So that's definitely my promise.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so when you were crafting this world, crafting the story, because I just said in the beginning, it is a blend of historical facts, as you mentioned, from your own family's history, as well
Mhm.
as fictional elements just to help move the story in certain places that may not have enough history, and like certain parts, there's not enough story to help go along, so another fiction element has to come in. What has been like the feedback from like people you share the story with, readers, and so forth?
So far so good. I mean, I my plan writing this book wasn't to write like the next bestseller. You know, this book, it was mainly like just my own project. And as I wrote it, I was constantly debating whether or not to actually like put it out there for other people to read, just
Right.
because it's more for me and for my family. But, you know, as more and more people read it, they said, "Hey, like this is actually pretty good. Are you going to publish it? You know, either self-publish or try the traditional publishing." I mean, they said it's a really emotional and really like interesting story that really kind of captures their attention early on. And so through my beta readers feedback, I decided in the end to actually move forward and publish it.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I'm actually glad you brought that up about, you know, the overall goal you set out when writing this book, how initially you didn't set out with the goal to publish it. This was nearly just a project, a passion project for you and your family to tell their story. And from the feedback that you've gotten from your readers encouraging you to uh, promote this and present it on the world stage, that is incredible. And I also imagine for a story like this, there is a sense of vulnerability, because not only is it a passion project about your family, this is something that you've been working on, I imagine, for a very long time. Hours of editing, hours of revisioning, finding readers, getting their feedback, and then applying it into the story to help it be better. And then all those hours and hours, long nights, and everything. I would definitely imagine nearing the stage of going to the route of publishing it, there's sort of that anxiety or fear in the back of mind, that sense of imposter syndrome of, you know, presenting this story and whether or not it's going to be received by other people who may or may not enjoy this. And that, I imagine, is always intimidating for any author. So for you, Kandice, have you ever had those moments of imposter syndrome or those types of voices in the back of your head when you were crafting this story and even nearing the decision to whether or not publish it? And if not, what has disciplined you to continue not just writing the story and continue revising it, but also make the decision to publish it and put it out there on the digital stage? Because going back to the beginning, you believe this story needs to be shared with everyone because possibly someone else's family has gone through something very similar.
Yeah, so I felt imposter syndrome all the time with this. I mean, because I'm not really, I'm by trade, by educational purposes, I'm not an author. I'm an environmental scientist. That's been my whole career, like since I graduated college, back in 2012. So it's been a really long time. And but I just kind of really leaned into the fact that while I was in my studies, the classes I did enjoy most were English, were literature-based classes. And so I just remembered those, just really remembered those and those what I was taught. And I kind of like moved forward with it. I just pushed myself. I feel imposter syndrome with a lot of things in my life, as I'm sure a lot of people do. But the way to fight it is you acknowledge it, but you're like, okay, well, that's done. Let's just keep going. Let's just keep moving forward. And I know that when you open your life, a certain part of your life to the world, especially with something like a passion project, right? Like writing a book, or just any like content creation whatsoever.
Right.
Like it opens you up to rejection in many ways. And because people feel a sense of autonomy on the other end of a keyboard, right? And so a lot of times that they feel entitled to write, not nice things to people, like
right,
and everything. So that is a fear in itself for me, is that sense of rejection, as because I'm only human. But again, I'm just sitting here like, well, so what? They didn't like my book. Well, someone else may have liked it, right?
Right.
So it's just one of those things that you just have to let slide off your back. But I do think that comes with experience. I'm sure the first bad review I get is gonna hurt, if I decide to read it. But in the end, that's just someone's opinion. And I hope, even though if someone doesn't like the book, they were able to at least get something out of it. But
definitely 100%. Reviews are definitely important, but also to know the difference between, constructive criticism and just overall bad reviews. I talked with a lot of authors on the show that bad reviews, just to be bad, are not really constructive. Constructive criticism, where there's like comments in like certain parts of the story that could be improved upon, that is always good. That is always helpful. And sometimes constructive criticisms are even something more difficult to swallow, especially when they are very detailed and very lengthy. I remember one review I got, and it was on like a writing platform on Inkit many years ago when I joined back in 2018, 6 years ago. This person wrote a very, very lengthy review. She loved it, but she had everything. It's like, wow, okay, thank you to this person and for like giving all that. And funny enough, that person's now my editor for my 2 books. So it is really incredible. And she actually kind of, among many other people, said, you should go around publishing this. And now we lean into more of the business side of being an author. So, Kandice, as you said in the beginning, you were not initially motivated to publish this outright. This was merely just a passion project for you and your family to tell this incredible story. But as you said, also from the feedback you've gotten from readers, they suggested you should publish this story because this is an incredible story. So from that moment, did you initially go the self-publishing route, or did you want to try your hand at the traditional publishing route?
Oh, I totally tried my hand at the traditional publishing route. I tried it for a long time. Maybe I gave myself a year. I, in hindsight, I feel like that might have been too short. I'm not sure. You can give me your opinion on that.
All right.
But after a while, I mean, when I first started trying, my book was definitely, I should not have started trying whatever I did, because it definitely needed some improvements for sure. Um, but yeah, after that didn't work out. People kept recommending self-publishing, but I don't really consider myself a very business savvy person.
Right.
Um, so I I will admit I have no idea what I'm doing, but I just threw a ton of research. I was like, okay, I'm gonna try this and see how it goes, especially with marketing on social media. I consider myself a very private person, so
Mhm.
making an author account and trying to engage with people, it was very difficult for me because I don't really know how to specifically do that in a way that will, gain the followers, gain the attention that I want my book to have, or the engagement that I want my book to have. So, but I'm trying, and that's fine. So, yeah.
I 100% agree. I definitely think the marketing aspect is probably the hardest part about being a self-published author. Creating the
Mhm.
story is one thing, marketing it is another.
Mhm.
Because in that marketing process, you have to find a cover artist, you have to find an editor, and that all out of pocket, and that is
Yeah.
money. One person who I had on the show said there's two brains an author has. It's the creator and it's the businessman. The creator's
Mhm.
sole purpose is to make the product. The businessman comes out when the product is finished, and now it's time to sell it. And it's
Mhm.
not easy. Being a self-published author is not easy. It is a business. Marketing the book is a nightmare. I know that like all too well. Now in my third book, I'm still trying to figure out, what marketing tools to do. And now I'm even trying to do ARC readers and street teams to help me with that. And it's a grind. It is a hassle
Mhm.
and a hustle just to
Yeah.
try to meet the goals that you set out with, with the marketing aspect. And I definitely think when it comes to marketing, another thing that I think all authors really have to really look into and consider is, the audience. As I've talked many times on the show, for us authors, our first audience is us. We write these books because we enjoy them. But when we make the decision to publish them, we have to consider, okay, what genre are we writing for? And what's the audience that we're trying to target? Is it
Mhm.
a general audience, or is it a very narrow, specific audience? And each genre, their audience is vastly different, and in terms of size, also vastly different. Case in point, an author I had on the show who's done like a lot of market research, as well as a reviewer who also add the same thing. The one genre that has the most number of readers per month and then per year is the romance fantasy genre, which, according to market research, readers read up to 6 books a month,
Oh
as
yeah. Super
opposed
popular
to
right
six
now.
books in 6 months for the general fiction or science fiction. So when I heard that, I was blown away. So for you, Kandice, in your period of research, did you try to get an idea of who your audience was and what genre you were writing for?
Well, funny enough, when I started writing the book, that same year, the first season of Bridgerton came out,
Ah,
and
okay.
it gained a lot of popularity really, really quickly. And in that I was, obviously Bridgerton is Regency era. Mine is in the 19th or the 20th century, early 20th century. So it's definitely different, and it takes place in a completely different country. But I kind of wanted the feel of it to be the same. So I definitely kept that in mind as I was writing. Like, okay, I want people who like Bridgerton, who like Pride and Prejudice, to kind of fall in love with this novel, and and really just want to read it, because I really tried hard to maintain that same feel that Julia Quinn. And I hate comparing myself to really classic authors because I'm not even close to Jane Austen, but you know, but her book, Jane Austen's books, she has a very specific audience that she writes for, and to
Right.
this day, Pride and Prejudice is still huge, and
Definitely.
I'm definitely a fan. So I would love if any of the people are watching this who love Bridgerton or Jane Austen, give it a try. And I'd love to see if I succeeded in embodying that same kind of feel that Julia Quinn and Jane Austen have.
Nice. And it actually leads into the next question, which is another form of research that I think all authors should do is read in the genre that they're writing for, because that also helps with like, okay, what type of stories do people like in this genre? What is like the common theme that is in each of these stories? Because an old quote I used to live by was writers are liars, cheaters, and thieves. We make stuff up, we cheat people out of time, and we steal from everybody because the same story has been told numerous times. Some cases that is true. The same type of story with the same archetype characters and scenarios has been told numerous times, but we enjoy it. And it's in those examples that a lot of authors, including myself, like to derive our research from in terms of like character development, story structure, thematic themes, world building, and so forth.
Mm.
So for you, Kandice, what authors really helped you bring your family story to life, bringing 20th century Italy to life, the clothes, the language, how people spoke, what the world was like? So what authors really helped you uh, create your world and your story, and also help craft your authorial voice?
So I'll answer that in two ways, or in two parts. It wasn't necessarily other authors that helped me, build my world, build the characters, how they speak. That was purely research. I did so much research for this book. I did a deep dive on ancestry.com. I just, hours after hours on the computer just to figure out what, 1903 Italy was even like. And so that is how the world within my book was built. Was
Mm.
so because I am a scientist by trade, I wanted to be as factual as possible in terms of, the little things. Like in the prologue, Maria, the heroine Maria, is walking through a mulberry orchard used to cultivate silkworms. But and that's not just something random that I did. That was very factual to that time period in southern Italy. Is that the southern part of Italy, called Calabria, was known for their silk trade. So many families had mulberry trees, and they would breed silkworms by letting them feed on the leaves, and then peasant families would come and harvest the cocoons and then extract the silk, and then the silk would be sent to artisans to spin into these beautiful tapestries or clothes. So it's little things like that, just purely through research, that really helped me.
All
But
right.
in the way that they speak, I realized that in Italian, they don't really use contractions like in English, especially
Mm-hmm.
older Italian. So when the characters speak, I have them not use contractions whatsoever. So instead of can't, it's cannot, or isn't is not, because I wanted it to be as close to grammatically correct as Italian is. And I do have a few Italian phrases in there. At the beginning of my book, I put a glossary, so I definitely learned a little bit of Italian while writing this. So that was really fun. But in terms of an author that kind of helped me read or helped me with the flow, I would say. Now, I'm one of those people that love the romantasy, the romance fantasy stuff. I like Sarah J. Maas. Sorry, I'm on that bandwagon for sure. But so as I was writing this, I was reading her stories, and I really enjoyed how the flow of her books went. So I definitely tried to emulate that flow, as you know, because you got engaged really quickly in most of her novels, and I really wanted, because I don't know about you, Gabriel, but when I read, if I'm not hooked by like the third chapter, it's really hard for me to finish a book. So
I'm exactly
yeah.
the same way. And I 100% agree with you. Me being a classical historian, I want to make sure even my stories are accurate as well. Case in point, my first alternative historical fiction story, which is also a what if story from my debut novel, it explores Greece in the 470s BC with the titular character Amyntas Baru, who's a Spartan who fights for the Persians. Now, in my debut book, The Gathering, Amyntas, well, I called him Amyntas. I never gave him his last name, but he fights with the Greeks and he wins the Battle of Plataea, which happens in history. In this alternative what if scenario, for those who have not read The Gathering, spoilers, if one goes back to their time of summoning, they change their whole timeline and it makes a new universe. And so that's the universe that Amyntas now lives, but his memories fit that new timeline. So the Spartans are with the Persians and they dominate all of Greece, save for Macedonia. And I wanted to bring the ancient world to life in terms of how people dressed, what they ate. Carthage, I wanted to bring that place into existence. Sicily, Thrace, Persia. I wanted the characters to feel like they belong there. And going back to what you said, the language was difficult for me too, because what did the ancient Persians speak? I really don't know specifically. So I had to make the creative decision. I'm going to use modern Persian for the story and then translate it. Same with Greek. I use modern Greek for some of the characters, even though they speak English throughout the story. In some parts, they speak their natural or native language, and that was tough to
It was
do.
hard. Yeah.
Yes.
I told myself for the second novel, I was going to have it take place in Germany.
Oh,
And
geez.
I was like, well, I think I'm going to change it to England, so I don't have to worry about another foreign language like that. But
Oh my gosh. But it is true. And it's in like writing specifically like historical fiction. There's like an audience that almost like expects it to be historical, accurate, but also still a great story. People who can learn something. And that's what leads into the new thing that I live by, which are the 3 E's: educate, entertain, and enlighten. And I love living by those 3 E's because they are important. And now we move on to the readership. And the reason why I bring this up, listeners who are new to this and watch this for the first time, the readership is generally different from the audience, because you can market to your particular audience, and in that audience you have a ideal reader that you're trying to market to, whether it's YA, fiction, general fiction, a certain age range, certain demographic, certain group, whatever. But the readership that we always sometimes market to may not always be the same throughout the journey, especially if we're writing a series. You can start off with one reader group, and then by book 2, you have a different reader group that's completely one that you did not expect. And as you know, here on the channel, a lot of authors have said that their readership has changed over time, and that also reflects their growth as an author. So for you, Kandice, has your readership changed from the initial conceptions and writings of Love and Defiance to now?
Surprisingly, I am noticing, I mean, my book hasn't been released for a very long time, but I am noticing kind of a shift. Yeah, because when I was first writing this, I had in mind that I was like, okay, I'm going to market this to women in their like 20s, maybe to mid 40s, and see how it goes. But I've been noticing that it's a lot of older women that quite enjoy the story. So maybe women in their 50s and 60s. So that's been really
Oh,
interesting. I didn't expect that, but when I think about it, it kind of makes sense. Because I think that demographic, they don't really like this is a very generalized comment here, and obviously
okay.
there's exceptions, but I think they prefer a cleaner romance novel as opposed to the more explicit types that
The
are
spicy romance.
popular nowadays. Yeah. And in my novel, I try to keep it really really tame. There is a sex scene, but it's not explicit at all.
Mm,
Because they're my great great grandparents. I definitely wanted to be
right. Yeah.
respectful of that. And in the end, I'm really happy that I kept it that way because I think it's good to add. I consider this on a chili pepper rating scale. I consider it like half a chili pepper in terms of spiciness.
Okay.
So yeah, so I think that's one of the main reasons why there's a shift in genres or in reader demographics for sure. So
Definitely. And then going back again to the romance fantasy genre being the most popular genre, I definitely feel when we hear that, it's like, okay, this genre is the most popular. This one's going to have the longest run time. A lot of new authors are kind of hooked by that. They're like, oh, I could write something in this genre because it's always
mhm.
popular. It's never going to die. I can write maybe two books and boom, it'll be instantly popular. And that I feel is like the danger for any
Mhm.
new author, self-published or traditionally published. And that's just when we come to a great statement that a fellow author said on my channel a year ago. Shout out to author Natalie Wright, author of Season of the Dragon. And she said, there is no guarantee that your debut novel is going to be the start of your legacy. That is the biggest lie a new author could believe. Now, there
100%.
have been exceptions to this rule. Some authors who I've met have been able to reach award winning status with their debut novel and live off the success and create new series of novels. But
Mhm.
on the off chance, you have those that rise, fall, rise again, and fall down pretty hard. And then this comes back to imposter syndrome with a vengeance, talking about your head like you made a fool of yourself. And this also ties with another thing that I've learned, which are the long-term goals of being an author. Did you want to be an author and just tell stories? Or did you want to be known as an author and reach notoriety and status?
Mhm.
Because those are two very different goals with two different mindsets. So for
Mhm.
you, Kandice, in your opinion, how important is it for new authors to understand that there is no guarantee that their debut novel or debut anything is going to be the start of their legacy, but it should not deter them from writing stories if they are truly indeed passionate about being a storyteller, a writer, and an author?
I think that's the meat and potatoes of it all. Like, to be honest, like when you try to get a book published, and it's a very humbling experience because, like, having gone through the traditional publishing, you know, trial by trial by fire, it's you think you have something that's so great and perfect, like, oh, who wouldn't want to be the agent for this, right? And
Right.
then you keep getting rejection after rejection after rejection. Yes, the imposter system, the imposter syndrome sets in for sure, especially after, all those rejections. But um, it's not the end. I think as humans, I think fame and money and everything is very appealing to us, right? Like you can't
Yes.
deny that. It's so appealing to us. Like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna write this book, I'm gonna get super famous, And then, but I think the process is humbling for a reason, because it kind of um it makes you ask that question. Okay, why am I doing this? Am I
Hmm.
doing it specifically for the fame and the money, or am I doing it because I really love what I've created and I want to share it with people? And I'm not gonna lie, I had to come to terms moment like that too. Like, why am I doing this? And I realized that I love the book that I wrote, and I really want other people to read it. So screw it to the traditional publishing route. I'm just gonna self-publish, and then just get it out there for other people to access it, and hopefully they love it just as much as I do. But it's so important to, luckily that come to terms moment happened fairly early for me, but I think it's definitely for people who are either early on in their journey or considering writing something. It's definitely something you should think about, you know, as soon as, like, really soul search that, like, as soon as you can, because it really helps you find the right motivation to really push forward and complete your project. So,
Definitely, 100%. And it's not to say, viewers and listeners, if you want to go down that path of trying to make
yeah,
money, that is absolutely possible. But it is important to note that it is a grind.
it is a
Because
grind.
as one author said, grit trumps talent. Doesn't matter if you're the best writer, doesn't matter if you're the best prose, doesn't matter if you can bring characters to life that are so real, it's like they're in the room. If you're not willing to go through the hurdles, the trials, go through the fires and the flames, Dragon Force reference for people who remember that song, then you may want to reevaluate your goals that you set out from the beginning. Because if you do agree to go through all of that, you will be fine. And maybe your debut novel may not be the start of your legacy, but it gets your foot in the door. And that's the most important thing, because as time grows on and as we authors hone our craft, it may be our seventh or 12th book that people know us the most about. And then
Mhm.
at that moment, you can tell your fans and readers, hey, if you enjoyed this book, check out my others. And also, maybe in that moment where you have agents wanting to reach out to you saying, hey, we love this book. We would love
Mhm.
to have you be part of our publishing house, or even better, people from the media world who want to adapt your story into a limited series, a television series, or even a movie. Those are
Mhm.
all obtainable. It just takes a lot of work. Plus, it also helps me have a great following of friends and fellow authors who have been by your side since the get go, who
Yeah.
have supported you. Which now leads into the next question. For you, Kandice, when you started this journey of telling this story about your family, who have been by your side from the beginning? Friends, family, and fellow authors that you've met on Instagram, or Bookstagram, as it's called.
Yeah. So before I answer that, I want to add one more thing to the last question. And
Okay.
that was, it's different for me and people like me, because I do have a day job that I also love very much. So for authors who are trying to make a living solely by being an author, I think yeah, you have to have that money making in mind. So like that, what I said was very specific to my situation. And
Right.
like you said, Gabriel, it's probably different for a lot of people, and it's totally okay. But
Hmm.
to answer your current question, um, so my biggest supporters, I would say, have one been definitely my husband. He he's supported me, just telling me just keep going, you got this. And then he let me get an editor halfway through, or not let me, but he encouraged me to get an editor halfway through. And like you said, it's out of pocket. Editors
Yeah.
aren't cheap for sure. But that was so helpful in, honing my plot and everything in the book. But I would say my mother and my mother-in-law for sure have been my two of my biggest supporters. My mother read my first ever draft, and even though it was completely trash, she was still like, "Oh, this is a great story. I couldn't put it down." And then my mother-in-law read one of my first, or towards the end, like one of my final drafts for sure, and she said it pretty much the same thing. So they really encouraged me. They told me that, they were two of the people when they suggested that I put it out there. They kept pushing me until I finally decided to self-publish. So definitely.
Nice.
And then, as I said, creating an author profile on Instagram, it was a little bit nerve-wracking for me, but there was the first author that ever followed me. Her name is at author Adeline. She just, her following me really kind of was like, oh my gosh, maybe I can do this type of thing. So I really appreciated that for sure. And I don't even think she
Awesome.
knows. I don't even think that she knows uh, that I felt that way about her follow. So
Nice. Well, that actually kind of leads into the second to last question before we get to the final one, which is almost like a sense of validation. I bring this question up because for authors, when we enter in this industry, we can bring all of our knowledge and all of the things we've learned from research and from own personal experience to tell our story and bring it about, which is incredible. But it's another thing entirely when we have a peer reach out to us who have read our story or who we've connected with, who have given us research insights, who have been our biggest motivators, who have helped us along the way, and they see our journey and they give credit where credit's due. So for you, Kandice, have you ever had that experience or those interactions with other authors you've met on Instagram or anywhere else on social media?
um, no, not really. So, like I said, I'm still trying to figure out the social media, kind of like get out of my comfort zone and really engage with people on social media. So, I'm still kind of working on that, but if that makes sense.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And that's completely fair. That is completely fair because the social media world, it is, especially for authors, it is incredible to meet new people. But it's also, I'm sure you definitely agree, Candace, it is kind of like it's social media. You don't know if it's someone's
Mhm.
legitimate or anything. I can tell you this because a lot of authors have told this on the show when I've reached out to them saying they want to be on like my show, they don't know if it's like a bot or a scam. And that's completely fair. That's a completely uh honest and fair reaction. And then I talk with them and I send them the links to my profile. It's like I am real. This is legit. And I name drop people
Mhm.
who also follow them to know that I've also had them and I've also met with them. So you know what, I completely understand. That is a very honest response and feedback. And speaking of responses and feedback, we now arrive at the final question of this amazing author interview. So, Kandice, this is a big one. So, brace yourself. All right. With everything that you are learning and still learning about being an author, marketing, promoting, reaching out and creating a circle of authors to help and just connecting with your readers and your fans with everything that you are learning on this journey of yours. What is your word of wisdom you'd want to share with fellow and future indie authors who are watching this?
Really just lean into the first reason you were doing this to begin with. I mean, because you're gonna get tired. You're gonna say, you're not gonna want to write anymore. it's a really lengthy process, and you really have to remind yourself that you have a story that you want to tell, and that alone should give you the desire to push on and complete it. And even after it's done, the fact that you have this story that you wanted to tell, and you have it in a book now, the fact that you want other people to read it, that should also give you the push to promote it, do whatever you have to do, send hundreds of queries out, just so really just lean into the initial reason why you did it in the first place.
Awesome. 100% agree. And now we've reached the very end of this amazing author interview. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another episode here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I want to give a huge thank you to our guest, Kandice Coppala, for coming on the show and telling us all about her story and her future series with this story going forward. Kandice, thank you so very much for being on the show. And where can people find and engage with you on social media to follow you, learn more about your story, and just be up to date with any future works you have in mind?
Yes, you can follow me on Instagram at author K Coppala. And yeah, I also have a website, www.candicecoppala.com. And on both of those, you can find where to purchase my book.
Awesome. I will link all those down below in the description of this video. Thank you all so much for joining us for another episode today. Again, a huge thank you to Kandice for coming on the show. She is an incredible author, incredible guest, and I urge all my followers to go follow her on her social media and to give her story a read as well as a review, because, as I said numerous times on the show, reviews are what help generate interest for us authors. That is the driving factor. So, read the book, leave a positive review, and help grow Kandice's story. And yeah, this helps spread the word. Thank you, Kandice, again so much for coming on the show, and I wish you the best of luck with your endeavors as an author.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you, listeners, so very much. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below what was your favorite part of the interview. And until next time, this has been The Wandering Scribe and The Wandering Quill, signing out, wishing you all a wonderful day.
Bye.